We'll just give a couple of minutes. Welcome to everybody so far who have joined us. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes to let attendees trickle through, and then we'll get started. Okay. All right, let's get started. A very warm welcome to everyone who has joined this collaborative webinar between Zendy and OAPEN. This webinar is titled Empowering Discoverability, Increasing Open Climate Research Access in MENA. As the name suggests, we'll be discussing all things open access and climate justice. And today we're celebrating day one of Open Access Week. So happy Open Access Week to everybody on the call. My name is Monica Chinsami. I'm the head of marketing at Zendy, and I'll be moderating today between our very diverse panel of speakers today. First up, we've got Kamran Kardan. Kamran is the CEO of Knowledge and the co-founder of Zendy. We have Sara Crowley Vigneau, Partnership Relations Manager at Zendy, Tom Mosterd, Community Manager at DOAB and OAPEN, Declan Conway and Marvin Brown are both joining us as authors, and they'll be discussing their publications with you all. Just a quick reminder, there is a Q&A section on this webinar where you can add your questions throughout the sessions, and we'll answer them as they come up. So please feel free to engage throughout the sessions as you wish, and our panel will be happy to answer questions for you. Before I hand it over to Kamran, I'll also say this webinar is recorded, so we'll also share this after the event so you can catch up on anything you may have missed. Before any further ado, over to you, Kamran.
The usual mistake of not unmuting before speaking. It still happens. Well, thanks very much, Monica. Big shout out to everyone in the room today. Tom, Declan, Marvin, and my colleague, Sara. It's a pleasure to be here today. And especially what a way to start the Open Access Week with a webinar discussing the benefits and the topic itself. As a company, we've been quite busy during the Open Access Week. We've done an Open Access Week quiz. We're in the process of launching a big event across the MENA region called the Forum for Open Research in MENA. That's happening, that's starting, the strategy meeting is starting tomorrow. The main event is starting day after tomorrow. I'll be traveling. So we are all very busy during Open Access Week and with very, very exciting initiatives. So without any further ado, I'll start our story with Zendy and why Zendy was created. So Zendy is a product of Knowledge. We are just celebrating our 10th year anniversary of being a company mission-driven, moving towards a more knowledgeable world. Looking at the global landscape of accessibility to scientific content, we saw that basically we can still see this today, that in order to access top scientific literature and publications, you either need to be a member of an institution that has a subscription to these resources from the various publishers, like Elsevier with their platform Science Direct, Springer Link, and all the other publishers. You need to either be part of an organization, which that organization would or would not be part of a larger consortium. And then again, you might have subscription to certain databases and some not. And therefore, there's a big mismatch across the world, or inequality when it comes to accessing scientific information. So we really believed in that mission, that we need to democratize access to scientific literature. And we saw that affordability and discoverability is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to accessing scientific papers. Now, when we talk about affordability, if your organization does not have a subscription to some of these databases, then in order to find a single article or a book, there's like for an article, it can be anything from $10. I was talking to a publisher earlier at the Frankfurt Book Fair, and they're charging like $40 access to a single paper. And imagine if you're doing a literature review across a subject and the number of articles where a study was suggesting that at least you need to read at least 100 articles. Now imagine that will turn up in terms of fees that need to be paid. So affordability is a big issue. Then accessibility. Now, in many libraries, discovery of content is not easy. In a completely open access world, you'll have, again, pockets of OA content in different resources. And again, like, unless they're accumulated in a single user-friendly interface, there's also challenges in accessibility of content. And the same on the discoverability, finding the right material, what you're looking for. That's something that we're seeing in that space, that with new AI capabilities, that searching is improving and discoverability is improving when it comes to scientific literature. So when we're looking at these versus the issue of pirated access to scientific information, we thought that really Zendy is that answer to overcome these challenges. And looking at the contribution towards SDG number 10, when it's reducing inequalities. And so we believe that with Zendy, we'll be able to reduce the inequalities of accessing scientific literature, and hence supporting SDG number 4, quality of education. So we believe that really, in order to advance knowledge, you need to have access to knowledge and to be able to make evidence-based decisions in today's world. That is, we're bombarded with fake news and a lot of information that the accuracy is not really viable. So when we go to the next space, the next slide, please. And when we look at the topic of climate action, which is SDG and number 13, enabling access to the scientific data and the scientific research that is available on this topic is crucial. And it's a fundamental part of policy making and really building informed and inspired communities that want to impact the immediate environment, and as a result, the world around us. Never like today, the issue of climate change and climate change is becoming more important. Just earlier on the call, we're talking about delays in rainfall in certain areas, forest fires, a very dry summer, and we're all impacted by this change in one way or another. And it's really through the power of knowledge that we can be more informed at the forefront. We can make better decisions, we can make better policies, and we can really advocate change. So that's the area where we come in. Like, we've seen the power of knowledge when it came to the pandemic, for example. There was a lot of information here, there, and in different places, but having that credible source of information became very important. Having access to that latest research is actually what supported in producing the vaccine in a faster than usual time. Many publishers, they were at the forefront. They made all their COVID related research available for free. It took some time, but it shows that having access to that information is very important when we're looking at global issues. And it doesn't need to be triggered by an event, or usually these events are not pleasant in order to really open the gates to scientific information. So that's why we're here today, to really talk about some of these challenges. And as a company, our way of contributing towards solving some of these global issues is by really democratizing and freeing access to scientific literature, supporting the OA movement and providing the OA content in a single discoverable resource, and making paid content also affordable through the new business model that we've came up on Zendy Plus to make access to scientific information more affordable. So this is my contribution to the topic, and emphasizing the importance of accessibility and availability of related scientific information to be able to make better decisions and be more informed on these important topics that affect every one of us.
Great, thank you so much, Kamran. What I'll do now is I'll hand it over to Sara, who is going to continue. Let's go, Sara.
Thanks very much, Monica. And hello to everyone who's online today. As Monica said, my name is Sara. I'm the Partnerships Manager for Zendy. So following Kamran's presentation, I'm going to be speaking a little bit more about Zendy Open, which is Zendy's open access online library, climate justice, and OA itself. Kamran's spoken about Zendy's mission and the importance of accessibility and discoverability for all users worldwide, including in MENA. The Zendy Open platform essentially is our key tool in enabling us to provide top-tier, peer-reviewed content to students, to researchers, professionals, and interested readers worldwide, whatever their location or their situation. So this allows us to bypass the challenges of funding and accessibility, which so many researchers and students will be all too familiar with. So to tell you a little bit more about Zendy Open itself, the platform has over 45 million publications to date, and we are incredibly excited to be partnering with OAPEN to add books, open access, thousands of open access books as of today. You can see a screenshot of the platform on the right of my screen. The search engine allows users to enter keywords, titles, author names, ISBNs, ISSNs, and to get results in over 60 languages. Through the search functionality, the user can very easily filter down to get the most useful and relevant content. And they can then also cite, export, share, download. And I would say that the best way to get familiar with Zendy Open is, if you have a moment, just to go onto the platform and try to do a search. It's a very user-friendly platform. So Zendy has content in all disciplines, including, of course, climate science. And in addition to our partnership with OAPEN, we are very proud to partner with leading publishers worldwide, both in the social sciences, humanities, but also in STM areas. And some of the logos of our partners are on my screen below. And Monica, if we can move to the next slide. So we, as Kamran was saying, we're really pleased to be able to hold this webinar this week during Open Access Week, especially given the theme is climate justice. Again, Kamran spoke about enabling open climate research, and he spoke about SDG 13. And certainly there's never been a time when open research has been more important, more relevant, contributing as it also does to SDG 4, which is about equal access to education, and SDG 10, which is fighting inequalities worldwide. So our agreement with OAPEN now means that hundreds of new climate-related books are available on Zendy Open. And undeniably, climate research touches all aspects of our lives. It's important to our education, to our health, to our homes, our societies, and of course, our children's futures. And as such, the range of subject areas including climate research is vast, ranging from sociology, humanity, through to politics, law, environmental studies, and physics. And so, as you can see on my slide on the left, we have a range of books touching on all of these different subject areas. We have religion, justice, health, education, and policy. So these books are now all available to Zendy users, and a little later we will have two authors speaking to us about their books and about climate justice. Very interestingly, we see a range of user groups on Zendy Open, searching on Zendy Open. So approximately a third of those are students, as you can see on my graph on the right. Another third are lecturers and academic researchers. And we also have over 20% of professionals, so people outside of the academic sphere. These readers now come to us from over 130 countries, and we've seen numbers this year growing exponentially. In 2022, Zendy Open user numbers have trebled. So I think a huge amount of interest in what we're trying to do at Zendy. So as such, we're pleased to be contributing in some small way, both to enabling open access to knowledge and more specifically to opening climate research. So again, I would emphasize that the best way to experience Zendy Open is just to go and have a look at the platform, to try search and see what you come up with. On that note, many thanks to everyone online, and I'll hand it back to you, Monica.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a great opportunity now to welcome Tom. As mentioned at the outset, this is a collaborative webinar between Zendy and OAPEN, and yeah, Tom, looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Kamran and Sara, for this great start and hearing more about Zendy and how we're all actually working on this together to achieve open for climate justice. I will be speaking a little bit more to the work that we are doing at the OAPEN Foundation. We are a not-for-profit organization based in the Netherlands, and our mission is actually twofold. One is to increase the discoverability of open access books, and the second is to promote and build trust in open access book publishing. And maybe to take a little step back as to what we mean with books. For us, this means academic, peer-reviewed books, such as monographs, edited volumes, or individual book chapters. And for us, we really feel that books should be included in the transition to open access. Books are the gold standard, really, in the humanities and social sciences. And so we must ensure that their contributions are also as open as the hard sciences, who, for instance, publish more in article formats typically. And while an increasing share of the research articles that are published each year are openly available, we should also make sure to include books and to ensure that crucial humanities and social science research is not locked up or left behind, but also increasingly openly available. And this, of course, includes very vital climate research, as we've just seen, and also vital research in other subjects, which we believe can and should be open to all eventually. So how we deliver on our mission and work on this is through various activities, but also through 3 platforms. or services that we offer. The first is the OAPEN library, which is a hosting, distribution, and preservation service, which includes over 25,000 peer-reviewed books from more than 400 publishers. The second is the directory of open access books, a similar service, however, not hosting the books, but only indexing these. Completely free service, which includes 60,000 peer-reviewed books from over 600 publishers. And the third is the OAPEN course, which aims to help academic book authors to better understand how open access book publishing works, and to increase trust in this process as well. We could move to the next slide. Thank you. So firstly, a brief overview of the OAPEN library. It is a repository including more than 25,000 books. We host, distribute, and preserve these books to ensure that they remain available online at all times. And our platform runs on open source software, DSpace 6. The books are openly available, but also our metadata, which means that anyone can take the books and the metadata as long as they adhere to the licenses for the books and use them for their services. So we very much encourage people to use our platform directly, but also to integrate the books into, for instance, library catalogs, third-party services such as Zendy, and really to ensure that these are discoverable wherever a user may want to find them. Over the years, the usage of the library has increased quite rapidly, where in 2016, we only saw about 1 million downloads in a year. This number increased to 8 million last year. And this year, we're averaging over 1 million downloads a month for these 25,000 books. The metadata for these books are available in various feeds, making it easy for third parties to include them in their services. The next slide, please. Then next to this, we also operate the directory of open access books. And some of you may know the directory of open access journals, or the DOAJ, which is a sister organization, but then for the journals. And for books, we are not as far yet as we are with the journal transition to open access, but increasingly it's picking up. As you can see on the bottom left in the graph, the number of books that have been added to the directory ever since its inception in 2012 has increased quite rapidly, with a few hundred to a few thousand books to over and around 10,000 books being added in recent years. And also this year, we expect that we will well exceed the number of 10,000 new open access books being added here. And the directory is really a global hub for peer-reviewed open access books, where we also work with regions that may typically not be as well connected to the global discourse. We work together with partners in Latin America, such as Cielo Books, who help us to better understand and find those publishers in that region. And this is something that we increasingly wish to develop over the next few years to ensure that all authors, publishers, and publications can be included. And around half of the books included in the directory are also published in a non-English language. So there is a great part of the collection which includes books in German, in Spanish language, Portuguese, French, and many other languages actually. And these include all kinds of publishers, ranging from the larger, well-known academic publishers, such as Springer Nature, Taylor and Francis, Routledge, but also independent publishers and university presses from all around the world. Again, all the metadata is freely available, and this platform also runs on DSpace 6, which is an open source platform. The next slide, please. Then this is a snapshot which can look a bit scary. I can understand, as there is a lot of lines and things, but it is pretty much highlighting what we are doing on a daily basis. as we'd like to see our work more as the engine room or an infrastructure, as we call it, to ensure that all open access books are discoverable and included. So moving from left to right, we work with individual publishers or aggregators who work on behalf of the publishers to include their open access books into our services. And these can come in all kinds of ways. Some publishers have automated ways to send their books and their data. Some send these manually via email, as some publishers only publish a few books in the year. So we need to ensure that we can work with all these methods and capture these to bring them into the two platforms. Once these books have entered the platform, they are openly available. And as you can see, anyone can directly access them through our platform. So researchers, teachers, or readers, and they also do so. But we also make the metadata available in various formats to ensure they can be used by third parties. And there are a few examples here, such as Google Scholar, Base, which is an academic search engine, and Paywall, which is a browser plugin for open access content, and also Zendy. So we very much ensure that the content is openly available for anyone to use it from the platform, but also that it can be further disseminated to other services and service providers that may be able to better reach specific communities or are preferred by certain users. Then to the next slide, please. So that is the core of the work that we do with the OAPEN library and the DOAB, bringing the books into the platforms and making them openly available. But next to this, we also launched a new platform 2 years ago, which is a free and public information resource called the Open Access Books Toolkit. And the aim of the toolkit is really to help book authors to better understand open access book publishing and to increase their trust in open access book publishing. So this toolkit is made together with stakeholders such as publishers, open access advocates, and individual authors who all have experience with open access book publishing, and where we provide together information on topics such as what is open access, what are the benefits of publishing an open access books, and what considerations may be there for you as an author when you choose a license for your open access books. Again, this platform is openly available. Anyone can access these articles and use them or share them with colleagues or interested researchers. So I will leave it at that, and thank you very much for your time and for listening in, and please do visit the platforms directly or access these books via the Zendy platform. And I think now we will hear more about some actual authors who have experience with publishing an open access book.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that comprehensive overview. And yes, we will now be moving to Declan to give us an introduction to his book and also talk about his journey with open access publishing. Over to you, Declan.
Thanks very much, and thanks to the webinar organisers for giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit about my book, which is always a pleasure, having put a lot of effort into it. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about myself and the genesis of the book. What was the incentive to go ahead with it, because that has some implications for why we chose to go for an open access format. Then I'd say a little bit about the benefits of open access if one's able to achieve that. And thirdly, I'll say a bit about strategy, how you want to promote a book. If you put the effort into writing the book, then it's super crucial these days to try to promote it as much as you can. So I'm a geographer. I'm based at London School of Economics. I work in a research institute called the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment. And a lot of my work is around the idea of how we can encourage and support society to deal with the consequences of climate change. So I don't work on mitigation, which is reducing emissions of greenhouse gases, but I work on given that the climate is now changing, it's going to change in the future, we need to adapt to climate risk as it develops over future decades. And that's what the book is about. And the title of the book is Climate Risk in Africa, Adaptation and Resilience. And the book is a synthesis piece that comes from a very large research program called Future Climate for Africa that was funded by a combination of a research funding agency, the UK research funding agency, a national agency, but also a UK department, what was known as the Department for International Development. It's now the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Agency as part of the government. And so the idea for the research was to make it applied and to make it relevant and accessible to particularly African countries. The whole program was pitched towards developing capacity within African countries to address risks of climate change. The book came out of a number of very large research projects with multiple partners, different disciplines. A lot of work was published in scientific journals and generally open access, actually because of the policies of the research funders, which I'll come back to in a minute. And we felt that because there was so much sort of technical and quite siloed research coming from the program, we wanted to produce something that was a bit more interdisciplinary and cross-cutting, and that will provide a synthesis across these different technical elements of the program. And hence we went ahead with the book, which is an edited volume and cuts across understanding or social science understandings of climate risk, what it means for society, through to some more technical methodological examples of how one can address climate risk in terms of planning, and thinking about how we might use climate information to help support planning for long-term development activities in different parts of Africa. So it's quite broad ranging, and it's very synthesis in terms of its objectives. So secondly then, why open access? Well, I've said the funding mechanism for the book has a big influence on that. So our funders were keen for us to democratize the research outputs from our work, and we were very lucky that they would enable us to do that. So they were keen on having the book, and they were happy to support the costs of producing an open access book, which are not trivial. I mean, some of you may know that if you want to have an open access paper in a journal, then as an individual or as an institution, you need to pay for that. That can be anything from a couple of $100 up to thousands of dollars. So it's quite an expensive process. And for the book, which was published through Palgrave, it cost us, I think, about £700 sterling. So maybe round about almost $10,000 US dollars to go ahead with the book. So it's a big sum of money that you have to find from somewhere, either through your funders or through your institution, and that is not a straightforward thing to do. In our case, we were lucky because it was part of the funders' remit to go ahead with it. We were very keen to make it open access. It gives you huge exposure. I was looking at the publisher's website this morning, and we've had 39,000 accesses since the book was published about 18 months ago, which for quite a niche subject area is pretty good in terms of accesses. So I'm very pleased with the exposure that it's got. And of course, it makes it available for a wide audience, way beyond academia, but to include students and practitioners and so on, which is something that we're interested in. And increasingly, if you're interested in impact through your research, then you want to try to make your work available and accessible to audiences like that. And of course, given that the book has a development component to it, an objective, then capacity constraints in country in terms of the funding available for libraries, for academics, these limit people's ability to access this type of information. So very important for us to try to make it open access as much as possible. And of course, that sits within an agenda around climate justice. Okay, so thirdly, I wanted to talk a little bit about strategy. So I'm not talking so much about the subject of the book, but a little bit more around the kind of rationale of why one wants to go open access if it's possible. Of course, democratizing access is important, but also if you're going to invest a lot of time in producing a book, then you want to make sure that as many people as possible read it and take insights from it. So think about your audience, think about how you target your audience and reach your audience. We've heard about the interesting platforms that the two organizations support through this program, those sorts of opportunities, and getting your material out there through those types of portals is very important. But the other thing that you can do, and given the competition and limited time that we all have now, is try to support launch of an output through something like a webinar, or you can do online blogs and so on. You need to raise the profile of your work as much as possible and think about ways in which you might be able to do that. And the exposure is, of course, important because there are so many different publications and outlets out there. So worth putting the effort into that. The other points come up once or twice about translation, again depending on your audience and what the primary languages are that people are accessing information in or able to access information, then translation can be very important but to think about as part of an open access strategy. And then I thought I would just wrap up with a comment about the fact that, well, this book is about sub-Saharan Africa. The webinar is about the MENA region. We have the Conference of the Parties coming up in a month or so of time, which is the big United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change meeting. That's in Cairo this year. So there will be a global lens on the region, both Africa, but also, of course, the MENA region. And so it provides us all with a good opportunity to disseminate information that we're producing through our research, but also to engage in the debates that are going to happen through the COP, and to enable the MENA region to put itself on the map in terms of the key issues that it's confronting in relation to both mitigation of climate change, but also adaptation to climate change. So there you are. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Declan. That was really inspiring, actually, as I know that there are many participants here who might have open access publishing on their horizons. We do have one question. The question is, having contributed so much to your research, how easy or hard did you find the promotion aspect of your research?
I work in an institute where we have a small communications team, so that helps. And having been there for quite a long time, just interacting with the communications team is very helpful. The research program provided some technical support and advice and what we call a knowledge broker to help us disseminate our information. So increasingly now, we research projects and programs are engaging with roles of people who are knowledge brokers in some respects, similar to the company the two companies that are supporting this webinar now. But in this case, individuals whose job it is to communicate technical science, research-based information, social science information into information which is accessible and usable by practitioners, professionals, policymakers, decision makers. For us as academics, that's not always straightforward to do. It's quite difficult actually to produce information in quite the right format. So having advice and support for doing that is very helpful. And looking at websites, looking at the way people present information can give you good insights into the way that you might be able to do that. So on climate change, for example, we might look at, there's a website called Carbon Brief. There's a website called The Conversation, and those are oriented towards adding value and adding accessibility and insight to technical research-driven research for broader audiences. And if you read blogs and comments on those types of websites, it can really give you experience into the way in which you need to pitch and present your information to non-academic audiences. Then if you're able to get a blog or a comment on a website like that, you can link to the book website and so on, so you can give yourself good exposure in that way. And I think it's really crucial to do this kind of thing now. I mean, I'm a little bit older generation. I'm not so much online in terms of social media and so on, but for all my PhD students, postdocs coming through now, having a social media presence and thinking about strategy around social media and promoting yourself is really important as part of your career development, really. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now I'll hand it over to Marvin and I'll change the slide. Thank you, Declan.
So hello, it's very nice to be invited to do this. As you can see from the title, A Climate of Justice. And the basic theme of the book is, since the Atlantic trade, we have lived in a climate of injustice. And in fact, this climate of injustice prevents us from actually dealing with the climate crisis we face. So the book is about how to move from a climate of injustice to a climate of justice. It has different topics and it's multidisciplinary. Myself, I'm a practical philosopher. This is like my fourth book. I wrote a book 10 years ago called Civilizing the Economy, and I was very interested at that time in a Creative Commons license, so it would be open access. And for me, it wasn't possible at that time because I didn't see any marketing possibilities. So it was published by University of Cambridge. What happened with this book was I had a friend who was in charge of a series at Springer, so he said he would submit it to Springer, and Springer accepted the book for publication. Then I got an email from my editor saying, "Would you like your book to be open access?" I said, "Of course I would." So what happened was this group called Lyrasis, which is a group of mainly librarians and museum directors. They decided to use some of the money they usually give to Springer to support books that were in alignment with the United Nations Global Sustainability Goals. And so they selected my book to fund my book for open access. So that's how this book became open access, and it's funded by Lyrasis. In a sense, it's very much connected, I think, to what everyone here is doing, which is to move from knowledge and land and people being treated as commodities to be treated with dignity and things that people can share. Major part of the book is trying to change our attitudes, our perceptions, for example, toward the earth, that the earth is not a commodity, not only a commodity, it's not real estate. In fact, it's a living system. And throughout my book, I bring a lot of resources from indigenous communities, and I think they have a lot to say to us about the nature of earth, the nature of community, etc. So that's, some of the major themes is that we have to change our attitudes toward the earth, toward each other, in order to move from a climate of injustice to a climate of justice. on the Springer website now, and there's been about 15,000 downloads of the chapters since January. And the first chapter, which is an introduction to the book, has like over 2,000 downloads for that chapter. And the one that's probably the last chapter, the civic dialogue, has like 1,200. So what that tells me is that people, because of it being open access, they have a chance to look at the book and one of the chapters and see whether or not they want to spend more time with it. I think that's a real plus, right? That you can go on and look at this book, have access, etc., and decide if this is the view of climate justice that you want to work with, which is a different view than what most people are doing on climate justice. I don't think it's an opposite view, but it's a different view. And it basically says, if we want to really save the planet, we first have to deal with white supremacy. We have to deal with European arrogance. We have to deal with colonialism. Until we do that, my argument is we're not going to be successful in creating a livable environment. So I'm very thankful that the book is open access and people have a chance to look at the argument, and we'll see what happens from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marvin, for sharing. I just want to open up any questions to the panel. If you had any questions for the authors, or if the authors, you had any questions for Kamran, Tom, or Sara. Everyone's very quiet. I have a question for you, Marvin. You've been publishing in open access for a while now, and you've watched the journey of open access publishing, or the popularity increase. What advice would you have to someone who's not published open access before, but they're considering it? Do you have any thoughts on what you could say to them to encourage their journey?
Well, I think one of the major changes is marketing. 10 years ago, the open access marketing probably didn't exist very much. And now organizations like your organization and others, that's changed enormously. The other problem is funding. And I was very lucky, I think, that when I submitted my book to Springer, I had no idea that it would be open access. So I don't know what the answer to the funding problem is. Some of us don't need that much funding, right? We write a book and we're professionally employed. We could go on and submit it to access. But then you have to find a publisher who's going to publish the book, right? Who is going to bear those expenses. So I think that's the real problem, is how do you get funding for open access? My worry, of course, is that open access is funded only by philanthropists, by foundations. And I think what's happening generally, in my book argues that philanthropy will not save us. We need to have a more civic approach to funding of things that are important and necessary for citizens. But that's one of the challenges too, challenges of funding, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a couple of questions. Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. I just wanted to maybe add to Marvin's point. And first of all, actually very great to hear from both you and Declan about your open access publishing journey for books. I think that is something that we need to keep highlighting and to show the benefits of it. But you're very true that there remains a certain obstacle, I think, specifically for books, which is the funding component. I think that has been a challenge in accelerating the transition. Though I did want to mention that there are indeed examples, such as I think this book, which was part of this lyricist program, where typical buyers of these books, such as research libraries or research institutions, are increasingly looking to collaborate to keep on purchasing these books, but through an open access model, which would mean that they would cover the fees and not necessarily the authors. And that is still, yeah, it's still an approach that needs to grow, but it does offer another way to authors to publish open access without being faced with an enormous fee. And while research funders may, for instance, prefer this more straightforward approach where they pay the fee, there are also alternatives out there and publishers that do not charge any fees for the open access publication for a book, but where they recover the costs, for instance, with libraries or a combination of libraries and research funders. And I can just add 2 links into the chat to those who would be interested in more information on that. But it remains indeed a key issue that we have to work on.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for sharing those links as well. We'll make sure we circulate those at the end of the webinar also. Kamran, you've also got your hand raised.
Yeah, just following up on the conversation from Marvin and Tom. When it comes to the publishing process, it is a process, and like any other processes, there are costs involved. Now, as Marvin mentioned, many academics, they're actually willing to provide their content for free and to get that wider dissemination and to really to tackle problems and solve issues. But again, that publishing process is in between the author and the end user. When it comes to traditional scientific publishing and articles, before OA existed, authors would submit their articles for free. And through their publishing process, there was value added, there was the discussions of marketing, and when they wanted to reach the subscriber or the end user, they had to go through a subscription process, which is still the case, or a pay-per-view mechanism. Now, what's shifting is that process, it requires funds, and someone has to pay the bills in between. So it's experimentation with different business models, and of course, funders also making major contributions in order to make the results, the book chapter or the article or the book in the hand of the end users for free. But I remember doing a dissertation many years ago on open access business models around 14 years ago, exploring all the different mechanisms that publishers can actually fund open access. And one of the reasons that did trigger Zendy was providing an alternative source of revenue, or basically covering those costs without putting too much burden on a certain individual in one place or another. So definitely it is a challenge, and still further experimentation when it comes to especially open book publishing. We were talking with Central European Press. They have like innovative ways of contributions, that once that contribution reaches, then the book becomes free. So there's a lot of experimentation still going on. It does remain an issue, but we're hoping that this will end in some resolution.
Excellent. It's going to be interesting to see the space diversify over the next few years. Sara, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. My question's actually a little bit more specific. It's for Declan. This obviously is a webinar focused on MENA, and your book is on Africa. You mentioned, I think, that you had 39K downloads so far, which is amazing. So you've clearly had a lot of interest in the book. I was curious as to whether you're able to gauge what kind of interest has come from Africa, sort of African universities, African researchers, whether you had any data or any indications as to the interest from coming from that region.
Thanks, Sarah. Gosh, no, I don't have anything specific. So I can't give you a breakdown at all. I would say that given that we had budget and from our own perspective, we were keen to involve many actually early career African researchers who would rarely get the opportunity to publish in a book like this. So we had a nice platform, I think, for quite a few early career researchers African authors who led their chapters for the book. I guess as a result of that, there will have been a certain amount of interest, I think, from their own kind of peer group and community. So it would have gone out there. As I said, that we had a knowledge broker as part of the program who were based in Cape Town and had very strong experience across Africa in terms of promoting information. And therefore, I would think that the book would have at least, well, probably a higher proportion, but at least similar proportion to any academic textbooks on Africa in terms of the split. I imagine that they often get more of a northern audience than an African audience. But in this case, I think because of the nature of our ability to kind of communicate and target African networks, I think we would have probably higher levels of interest there. But that kind of makes the point about needing a bit of specialist experience to be able to hit those markets. You need to work with people who have good networks and comms within the region that you're interested in. So globally, that's fine, that's great, gets you out on a global profile, but it doesn't target perhaps the audiences that you want to reach within regions. And I'm sure the same would be true about the MENA region, that in terms of kind of press, media, academic networks, practitioner networks, you'd want to do a bit of work around making sure you utilize those to get the book out to the right communities in the region, and that is quite important. Because of course we're not interested in sales. We're interested in basically in more people accessing the information and taking insights from the information. So promotion is still important.
Thanks, Declan. That's really interesting. And I suppose the question comes because Zendy does have this focus on the region. Our marketing campaigns do target the region, so it's interesting to get your take on it. I don't know, Monica, if you wanted to add a few words on the marketing side.
I think it's been really interesting hearing from both authors today about the challenges they face with discoverability or getting their content discovered. And I think it's a theme across the entire open access sort of dialogue at the moment. So in terms of Zendy, we are really interested in working collaboratively with all members of the open access community, whether they're authors and also companies like OAPEN, to continue the conversation about open access and making sure we're doing everything we can to enhance accessibility and discoverability, especially in the MENA region. So anything else from the panel before we wrap things up? I'd like to say a big well done to everybody. We finished on perfect timing. So that's a great job by everyone. Unless there is anything else, I will just like to say that a very big thank you to all the panel members today for their time and for sharing. This webinar is recorded, so we'll also be making it available for people who may have come in late or those who may have missed it. And we really look forward to continuing the conversation all throughout Open Access Week and beyond, as we are all, heavily involved and interested in the many things that are happening in this space. So thank you to everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you very
much.
much, everyone.